So now we're going to go into 30 minutes of delving into what I thought might be the dark arts of cybersecurity. At a leadership level, we kind of need to know what questions to ask if we're asked to deploy a technology. So I haven't asked these guys to tell us about all there is to know about cybersecurity, but if you're being approached with a technology that you have to deploy, what are the cybersecurity risks that you have to at least be aware of as you think about deploying them? So for that, unfortunately, Herb Kelsey got stuck on the East Coast behind mountains of snow, and Patrick Phelan, the Chief Information Security Officer at UCSF, gallantly agreed to give the main lecture. And Luca Emili, who came in from Milano, who has a startup company but has a long history in cybersecurity, will do the moderation. So I'd like to bring up Patrick. There you are. Yeah, just flip it on and off you go. This is it. To take us there. Oh, yeah. Great, thanks guys. That was really awesome. Pay no attention. Not good. As long as it doesn't shock me, I'm good.
I told them I wanted to walk in under the table and just appear.
That would have been perfect. Hack your way in.
Hi, everybody. So usually when I have a captive audience like this, I just use this opportunity to complain about my job. My job it's literally a complete nightmare. I wake up in the middle of the night, I'm not even kidding, and I went on vacation to Thailand for a couple weeks, and I just got back, and I completely checked out, did not think about work, and I got back and I sat in the office and I'm like, oh God, like it all just came rushing back to me. But I'm still here, still breathing. So I want to tell you just a few of the high-level things that worry me the most. And then also I want to hit a vulnerability that's been in the news. That's usually all people hear about cybersecurity. I always know if something is on NPR in the morning that my phone is going to ring off the hook that day. So that happened earlier this week. That was a great welcome back from vacation. So I've been at UCSF for 20 years working in IT. I've been the Chief Information Security Officer for 3 years, 4 years. It seems like 20 years. We've got 30,000 plus faculty, staff, and students, and about 1,000 beds. Lots of admissions, lots of outpatient visits. 3 big hospitals, lots of little clinics. And as far as IT goes, we have enterprise IT, about 400 people. Then we have departmental IT, and at a place like UCSF, it's not like private industry. A lot of the services we provide are commodity, but then we have departments doing, unique research, and so they need to have IT people local to them. All in all, 700, 800 people doing IT at UCSF. There are only about 12 people on my staff, depending on the day. That number seems really small to me. I don't know if that sounds small. Hopefully it sounds small. Also, keeping those 12 people is nearly impossible. If any of you have kids who are trying to decide what to be when they grow up, go into cybersecurity. I pay really well. I will hire practically anyone that doesn't have a criminal record. Again, not kidding. So security in healthcare is bad. Why is it so bad? For years, healthcare has underinvested in security. If you look at financial services, they're spending 4 times the amount that we're spending. And at UCSF, I have the double whammy of healthcare and education. You can see we're down there near the bottom. A few years ago, the FBI even issued a general warning to healthcare, telling the entire vertical that you're doing bad. You need to do better at cybersecurity, and the whole industry is ripe for big breaches and bad things. And we've really seen that happen over the last few years. It's hardly a month goes by without a pretty big breach being in the news. And at University of California, our big event was almost 2 years ago at UCLA. They had a big breach, millions of patient records. It was, it's terrible. It can happen at any organization. It could be happening to me right now while I'm here, not paying attention to my phone. The good news with that, with all the breaches in the news, it's made it easier for me to make my case to leadership. In the old days, people in security were, the boy who cried wolf. You need to give me sacks of, with dollar signs on the side, or bad things are going to happen. These days, people at least understand. Everybody in this room has gotten a letter from Target or Home Depot or God knows where. Everyone, I think, at this point understands that the threats are real. So in healthcare, of course, we have HIPAA. HIPAA was sort of an empty threat for years. In the last few years, the Office for Civil Rights, they're the ones who enforce HIPAA. They've gotten very active with their enforcement. So whenever you have a breach, you have to report it to OCR, and they have what we call the wall of shame. They call it the wall of shame too. And if you look at the breaches on the wall of shame, it's basic stuff. So it's not that we're living in this world where, the North Koreans have decided to go after healthcare and they're just stealing all our patient records and everything. We're missing fundamentals. So those big chunks at the bottom, 51% and 10%, those are loss or theft of unencrypted computers or removable media. I mean, that's really low-tech stuff. That's not what I went into this field for. That's not intellectually stimulating, having a car broken into. And at the same time, more on that. The stuff that we're getting burned on is simple stuff, and we're burning ourselves. So Verizon, every year, they issue this data breach investigation report, and it's a fantastic report. It's even interesting to the layperson because it's written with a sense of humor, but it's one of the best sources for what are the real threats in the world. It covers all industries. So within healthcare, 68% of the time last year, it was due to something that organizations, they themselves did. Whether it's a malicious insider or just a naive insider. To that end, phishing is out of control. You've probably noticed this in your inboxes. It's the most common infection vector. Again, it's not sexy, it's not intellectually stimulating to me as a technologist, but it's the thing that wakes me up the most. In these days of ransomware kind of became a thing a couple years ago, and I like this statistic. In March 2017, 93% of phishing emails had the end game of infecting someone with ransomware. At UCSF, we've seen the number of phishing emails just skyrocketing, and it's a game of whack-a-mole. There are technical controls you can put in place, and I've spent a lot of money on more technical controls. I've gotten more aggressive with what sort of stuff I block. But when you think about it, the people in this room are very smart. Think about if you were trying to trick the CEO or the CFO of your company or the chancellor, you could probably write a pretty convincing message that would get someone to open an attachment or give you some piece of information. And in the old days when phishing was first a thing, you would get these emails in broken English from the Prince of Nigeria, and that, not many people are going to be tricked. People do get tricked. People still get tricked. But now it's gotten so sophisticated that no technical control is going to solve that. So in the end, even if I do my job perfectly. I need the entire organization to understand these threats and to be on the lookout. So I've talked about these basic threats, phishing, and another one that's at the top of the list is patching. Machines don't get patched. Maybe at UCSF, maybe I'm patching the 30,000 computers that I manage, but we also have visiting researchers, we have people working from home, we have all kinds of bring your own devices, and I can't control those devices easily. So that's another thing that falls under the security basics category. At the same time, even though the bulk of the incidents are coming from these simple things, there are sophisticated attacks happening. And it may be a very small percentage of the attacks, but we need to be worried about them because these are the big ones. This is just some article about Chinese government hackers. And in the news you've heard about North Korea hackers. They're the ones who hacked Sony Pictures a couple years ago. This is real. Nation states have big offices filled with smart people, and they're working 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. I can tell based looking at my logs. I can compare the time of the logs to 8 to 5 local time in these other countries. So they're working all day to get stuff. And when you think about emerging nations like China, the easiest way to catch up on research is to steal it. I have a brother who works in the FBI, and he tells me a lot of stories. He's involved in economic espionage, and he scares me. He's another reason I wake up a lot at night. What else scares me? Healthcare is changing. Since the Affordable Care Act, reimbursement rates are going down. So organizations are expanding geographically. At UCSF, we have Benioff Children's Hospital, Oakland, and we have loads of other clinics. And we're doing a lot of work with population health. But with that comes this expansion of our IT environment. Let's see. What else is really important? Medical device security. That terrifies me. More on that in a minute. Consumerization of IT. I mentioned bring your own device. People are on our network using your iPhone, your laptop. That's perfectly natural, but we need to accommodate that. Meanwhile, the government is down our throats, levying fines. HIPAA, as I said, it was sort of an empty threat for years. Over the last couple of years, OCR has audited organizations. They've levied gigantic fines. So it's a big concern. Medical device security. So at UCSF, we have a ton of stuff that's connected to the network. Infusion pumps, patient monitoring systems, God knows what. And this is a problem that didn't really have light shown on it until a couple years ago. Medical devices, the bulk of them are expensive, so they stay in the environment for a really long time. We have lots of stuff that's more than 15 years old. So 15 years ago, what did you know about cybersecurity? Probably nothing. So what did the companies know about it? We've got these old devices that were not built for today's threat landscape. We don't have any compliance standards right now. There aren't a lot of certifications, so FDA is doing a lot of good work. There's pre- and post-market cybersecurity guidance, which the contents of that guidance, it's great, makes a lot of sense, but we're playing catch-up. These devices, medical devices, were not built for the threat landscape we see today. So we haven't had any adverse events reported yet due to hacking, but it doesn't take that much to imagine some physical harm coming from a security flaw in a medical device. And that's really scary. I think I have my white-collar job. I never thought that my job would potentially directly impact patient safety. I I have the DT Sec logo down there. That's the Diabetes Technology Security Group. They've done a lot of good work in this area. Diabetes in particular have a lot of diabetics are hacking their own, closed loop systems, and they're doing all sorts of crazy stuff with pumps and monitoring. So there are certifications on the way. Meltdown and Spectre. So this was the NPR Vulnerability of the Year. And has everyone heard about this on the news or radio? When I heard the first news story about it, I did get pretty scared. The news was that when these vulnerabilities are patched, every computer running with an Intel processor was going to be 15 to 20% slower. That's mind-boggling. Every computer with an Intel processor, unbelievable. It's since, now that more information has come out, I'm not panicking about this. To your average organization like UCSF or a hospital, this is not the sort of vulnerability where it needs to be all hands on deck, IT folks working 24 hours a day to get things patched. But it is a huge concern. And these vulnerabilities, they break down something that we've taken as a given for years, and that's the isolation of programs from one another. So, AWS and Microsoft Azure, these big cloud services, they're obviously the wave of the future, and most everything that we use is running on those platforms. But we have compute workloads running on these services, and if you're using Amazon Web Services, your program might be running on the same hardware that's running a Craigslist server, and the same hardware that's running a Kaiser application. These vulnerabilities theoretically mean that someone in one of those other instances could break into your stuff, and it's undetectable. So this really is a catastrophic vulnerability for cloud services. We're going to see this situation change a lot over the next year. But the bright side of this, silver lining, I need these stories to be in the news every so often because it keeps my boss and my boss's boss concerned about cybersecurity. So they're kind of a necessary evil. For those in this room, what if you were going to ask me, what can you do to help us? Cybersecurity has to be an organizational priority. There's been this pattern of having a panic. Maybe there's a big vulnerability, and I tell the chancellor that the sky is falling and I need $2 million tomorrow to fix this. And there's this perception that we can do something, we can install this magic box that will solve a problem. And that's not how it works. Cybersecurity has to be built into processes, it has to be built into IT operations, and it's not an IT problem, it's the whole organization. The CEO has to understand what phishing messages look like, and the CEO's assistant has to understand what phishing messages look like. If you're building something, if you're building a program, if you're building a device, build security in. Think about it from day one. It's not optional. It's way more expensive to bolt it on after the fact, not to mention more difficult. Give security a seat at the table. If we're talking about hospitals, I mentioned UCSF expanding and partnering with more organizations. It's helpful if security is represented when we're evaluating organizations and how we're going to partner with them, because a big organization like us, if we partner with a small clinic with 4 physicians, how many IT people does a 4-physician practice have, and how many security people do they have? 0, obviously. They can't afford that. Cloud doesn't fix everything. A lot of marketing material says the cloud is more secure than on-premise, that's not true. It's not less secure than running things in your own big data center. There's a different set of threats. Like I talked about the meltdown vulnerability. I'm not that worried about meltdown for the stuff that I run, but for Amazon, it's a big deal. And frequently at big organizations, IT, it can be seen as an annoying bureaucracy, and people will try to work around us by going directly to the cloud, having their own servers. It's much easier if you involve us. We can help. Anyone who is good at my job is not going to say no to stuff. They're gonna try to help you figure out how to do something safely and in a compliant way. The other thing, make your customers' lives easier by being transparent. At UCSF, we probably have, I don't know, maybe 600-700 applications that are involved in patient care. And every one of those, we're evaluating them every year. We're doing a security assessment. So we have to talk to the vendors and interview them or review audit reports. Lots of people are very cooperative. Some are not. And we're so small, we're trying to do so much that when we meet a vendor who is not transparent with us and doesn't try to help make their product work in our environment, nobody wins. That was it. I could talk all day, or I could ramble all day, but...
Unfortunately, thank you. But we have to go on to the next session. We're not going to have a Q&A. I apologize for that. But thanks very much.